Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. If you'd like to have one of your songs seen in one of these videos, what you do is you head on over to the Discord channel that's linked in the description of this video. Words today. And there is a channel for submission, and then you get to put the thing in there, and then I might pick it randomly, which is how I do what I do. And today's first pick up is going to be Haven by It's Rodney, remixed by CamaCon, a moderator on the server. How cool is that? That was a random pick. All right, let's see what we have in this one here. Well, that was fun. And also an example of what it looks like when everything's a little too similar in the sort of stereo spectrum. You saw how there was a kind of a large wash the whole there, where everything had more or less the same spectral density, and it made it more difficult to parse which was what out of what. Even though I'm not even sure there was all that much more happening in this track than the previous one. And what was happening in this track was pretty cool. Some parts of it were a little bit like this whap 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 thing. I'm not having it. Like, it's not super great. It would have been cool, I guess, once or twice, but like I'm trying to generalize the thing I'm having an issue with it, and like mostly it's that it's this shape, this incredibly sharp filter shape, and mostly because it's so very not what everything else is, and the way that it is so very off from everything else that the fact that it happens repeatedly gets older faster than you would expect it to. Faster than it probably should, and I would almost use this maybe one time at like the end of a phrase instead of like the main deal. When it gets chopped up into the thing later and is like one or the other, that got pretty cool. Like, that's a cool bit, but this was still too much, and like these bits, it just was an improvement on it, but like I wasn't that big a fan of that particular sound. And this interlude is cool as hell. It reminded me a lot of Voltron, the current TV show on Netflix. I like it. And I like that soundtrack a lot, and I kind of dug the sort of motion into that. Your name is Game Beat, so I gotta wonder if that's sort of like your desire here. And you're on the right track. You're even doing the very like the sort of medley approach. It's difficult to kind of like modern game OSTs are about dynamic music, so there's not really a arrangement for things. It's mostly like a universe of possibility that can be arranged. And this is just one of them. And that's something. And I dig it. Mix-wise, it lacks that space stuff we're talking about with the stereo, which is, I think, self-evident with that comparison to the previous track in the certain locations of the track that are that similar. But the rest of it is mostly about how hard your sidechain is going, which is to say it should be a lot harder. Are you doing it at all? Are you sidechaining at all? Or if you are you doing like a super tight kind of like extremely light type, like transparency sort of gained type? I think also compare this to the previous track, how like whenever the kick and snare hit, there was quite the hole that showed up. And the fact that there isn't one here is mostly why this track feels like there's sort of like a large pressure to it versus a beat is sort of my description of how I feel about it, mostly. But it's a pretty easy remedy, and it will go a long way to making any kick in the snare pop. It's usually beneficial. Other than that, I like a lot about the direction, the sound design choices, how the choices of transition in your movement. The movement was cool. More songs should do that. Like, it's complicated and it's hard, but like it's just cool. So yay that. Coming on next, we have Overchug, contender for one of my favorite names. The song is called Mini. Let's see what this is like. That song had a lot of dynamic range. I was looking at the meters here, and it was pretty well perfect in terms of like how much dynamic range to have. And it clipped a bit, but that seemed to be the method. This is a very light touch track. Like this also has kind of like a sidechain issue, but only because it seems that it decided to go. It decided, I say, the person Overchug decided to make this track sidechain by way of note choice by saying like I'm just not gonna have bass playing while the kick comes in, and that's doing a good job of making like that amount of room. This is a very old school sounding and arranged track. It's very that, and it works. It's better than most of those ever were because they were not that so easily able to like know about what they were doing. They did, for the most part, but it was a lot of like just doing stuff, and this is doing it on purpose, and I like that about it. This kind of constant ring in that one bass tone though, it gets a bit much after a bit. Like out here, I was starting to be like, is there ringing in my room? Because there was a lot. And I'm actually not totally sure there's not now, but, begs questions. So, yeah. So I was mentioning in the previous track, and the previous one before that, stuff about the magnetoscope and space and dimension of differentiation. So, let's look at this guy. In particular, I want to point out what happens when this thing shows peaking. So you normally see that square show up, but on more than that, you see the cloud of stuff kind of get closer together and brighter. And this is a fun little physics thing because what's happening is it runs out of room to have energy expressed in one dimension, and so it expresses the energy in the next. And in this case, it's that it gets brighter. And they can think of that as like a z-axis. It's coming at you. And why this is valuable is because that has a quality that's clipping, and it creates extra harmonic content, and it makes the thing sound away. So then the thing that does that will sound different than the thing that doesn't. In particular, it'll sound like it's louder than the thing that doesn't. And it literally is because it's adding more stuff, but mostly it's just that like we're expecting a change in appearance as like commensurate with our imagined change in level. And there is an actual limit to how much the level can change. But if right up on when the level stops changing, it gets picked up by a change in energy in another way, then that makes us feel like it's still doing it, that it's still actually up there at that level and increasing and going and doing more. But mostly it just means that we're still able to detect a huge range of motion together. And that's why clipping stuff works like that. And that's also why I bring it up is because it's one extra dimension of differentiation. That combined with spreading stuff more, combined with, planning your hits right so that you know when things are other things and that kind of stuff. It seems a bit trivial to discuss it at that level, but when you're sound designing stuff, especially, you have to care about these things. Making a thing different from one thing to another sounds like such like a baby level thing to discuss, but it's like the whole heart of how we understand instruments are different. And the whole idea that we do understand it are different instruments is only because of extremely minor differences. Like how we understand DNA as expressed in like, a wild animal you don't know thing has anything to do with humans. Like has like a massive percentage similarity to our DNA strain. Like that's the same true with most instruments. We look at the harmonic spectrum is that they're mostly just the same thing. And it's just it's the minor last percentage of it that's expressed that there's the whole spectrum of difference that we understand as being different. So, and there's always so many things you can do to mess with that. And at the sound design level, it's mostly about picking and choosing how many of them you pick in which individual thing to make them feel different. And being so loud that they clip is one of them. And spreading them in stereo is another one. And you can use all of them. And that makes you have more possibility of more things. And it's beyond what, like the reason to bring all this up is because this allows you to have perceivably more things more accessibly beyond what the range of level allows. Because there is, again, a limit. It's always been the same limit. It's probably always, the day that stops being the limit is the day we stop caring about mastering. And then this discussion is moot. But as long as this is the case, what's occurring is that our whole job in improving on it is that we have to find new ways to express more power and more motion and energy. And that's why, clipping is one of them. That's why it works. Anyway, good job, Overchug. Overchug. Coming on next, we have Oracle. Don't let the water take me. That sounds like I'm on a country radio station. Okay, let's see what this is alike. Well, that was a weirdo. Nope, not looping. All right, well, this was a decent example of some pretty disparate differentiation. The second order harmonic being louder than the sub is a bit of a weird choice for me, and I could tell what note it was, and it was a fine sub, and I guess it worked. I'm gonna chalk that one up to a choice. I mean, just in case it's not, the one thing I'd recommend is either just not having that particular harmonic or to have there to be the sub that's louder. That's all. I dig the GLaDOS bop. That's pretty neat. Nothing really stood out to me about this track other than the GLaDOS bop, which was pretty cool. The arrangement, I'll give. The kind of like angry hatting is neat. Like the use of noisy-esque things that formed up a decent beat was pretty good. And I kind of like this sort of jank. Like jank step. Can that be a thing? I'd listen to some jank step. Yeah. Good job that. Oracle. Don't let the water take me. That was that. Anyway, coming up next, we have a collaboration between Skullk and Retrovex. Pandemonium. All very straightforward. Okay. I don't know why I'm singing that song. I probably shouldn't because that's what algorithms will find. Oh no, did I just do this video? Before that happens, let's listen to this track. Wow. Rad track was rad as hell. It had the dopest sound design I think I've heard in these videos. That was a lot of fun, all forwards and back. Like, that's some serious chops in there. Damn. I got some stuff to say, but let's seriously not lose sight of how freaking cool this is. A good job, Jesus. So this is basically just the bass problem track. The main issue is that the mid content does not peak nearly as high enough as the snare as does the kick to the bass. The bass is like, you know, up here-ish. The kick is like not that much higher than that, and then the snare is up here-ish, and then the mid content is just way down here. And then the net of this is that the cool parts of the basses and such are not the kind of present they should be. And the sub is stuff, and it isn't really that. But why this ends up being kind of mostly a sub problem is that this has to reconcile two things. A sub's performance as in a drum and bass kind of bass music track, and sub performance as in a cinematic experience. Which this kind of beginning intro is awesome. I love that a lot. And this sort of beginning experience of and being cinematic like this, you want to have the low end of it feel a kind of way relative to it, but what that ends up happening is that that's not totally the same amount of relative as it feel to this. And then when you go back to it, also the power disparate is weird, and so a choice sort of like it's dangerous. Like there wasn't any like the telltale artifacting of like having done too much of it in here, but it sort of feels like you were going kind of like as hard as you could, which is a little bit why that you probably are holding off a bit on the bids, is because you don't necessarily have the room for them because the sub's too loud. That is pretty much it. And it's mostly a choice though, because I'm not totally sure how well that'll stack up. Like the right mix of that version of it will stack up to like the right mix of this, because they're not really the same kind of mix. And it's one of the reasons doing this kind of thing is difficult in the first place. But this is so cool. This was such a cool ride. Good track was really good. Good job, you guys. Moving forward with that stuff. And coming up after this, we have Within the Spiral by Dr. Moguri. Burp, 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 spiral. Let's see what this is about. Very nice. Very Skylarking. BT would be proud. Excuse me. This had interesting mixed qualities. Like the kick wasn't really like the thing that peaked the loudest out of most of the time, but I'm not 100% sure how much that mattered. The wall of sound supersaw you had on this was perfect. The slices on this and the cuts and the angles on it on the negative space use and not use, like, it was good. I liked it a lot. It was a good time. I have no complaints about that. This was a bit harsh, how high this high was. It's a bit high in the highs is all. I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, the clicky, cool, faster bit stuff happens in between here. It was cool the first time, and then it was the same every time. And this is unfortunate, I know, but basically when you do something this fast and articulate, you open yourself up to it becoming old pretty fast, like we mentioned before in the previous track. But you more or less, the faster and more detailed you make the thing, the more varied you have to make it. And yeah, that's a lot of work, but that's a bit why the BT tracks are awesome, because that's what he does very manually. I mean, you don't gotta go that hard about it, but like, cause that's, I mean, we have tools to use, but you can, more than that. Like, you had the right idea with the variations you did use, you just need to do more. And you probably know exactly how much amount of work that is, and like, that's just, yeah, it's that. Other than that, excellent melody, excellent progression, good time, good groove. Like, it was just such a solid track. Like, damn, this is so very close to being, like, it should be already be up in places, and people should be hearing it. Good. All right. Coming up after that, we have BENJII, Three Eyes with Arcturian Consilium. And like, that could be a StarCraft reference, but I'm leaning more Warhammer. Or it could just be those words. All right, let's see what is. liked the storytelling in this one. The very like we're doing the things and things are happening stuff like that. I dig it. But what this track reminds me of a lot is my track Dreams of Bass, because it sounds like it, but it has basically all the same mixing problems that track did, and it was for me because at the time I knew basic things about mixing and mastering, but what I did not have was a modern enough reference for whatever it was I was trying to do. At the time, I had just come off of like a career doing metal, local band stuff. Come on, it wasn't all that epic, but point is that I wasn't doing electronic stuff for a while. And I came back and I was kind of like, stuff. I don't know, what am I doing? And I put it together. It was kind of bewildered that I could make it work. And then I actually went and like intentionally listened to a whole bunch of like all the stuff that had the sounds that I was making, and actually listened to how it was presented relative to itself. Like how loud was the kick? How loud was it? Like the bass to the kick? How loud were the hats? How loud were the like impacts and that kind of thing? I do that same thing when I go to try to learn other genres of music. I go and pick the things that are it and try and pick it and do it like it. And if you don't do that, then you're left doing that from memory, and your memory may or may not be all that great. And now on top of that, but you probably aren't even like, you're not necessarily doing a memory of even a sound. You're remembering a feeling because you weren't really listening to it analytically before. Chances are. I'm assuming a lot of things, mostly just because it sounds a little bit like the track of mine. But the point is the mixing issues are largely a question of like, how loud did you even want these things to be? I would recommend harder sidechaining, louder kicks and snares, more mids. The sub was really, really loud. And that's actually something that sort of makes me think about the referencing, because that's something that I always do. Is I like the sub to be very present and very in there and powerful. But when I go and when I'm at the stage of asking myself, why doesn't it sound right? And I go comparing it to something that does, one of the things I know is that they never have as much sub power as I do. And it's because they know how far is too far and how far to hold back. And there's also a whole industry of standard that's surrounded around expecting a sub to be at a certain level so that everything else can be at a certain level, and when played at certain levels. And that if you don't care about that particular universe that cares about those particular standards, then it doesn't particularly matter. But if like the standard is the one that's yours, and at first it's the memory of the feeling, and it's whatever can satisfy that feeling. Wow. It's whatever can satisfy that feeling. And if then like later you might be like, okay, well, it satisfied the feeling of being like a particular thing, but it doesn't satisfy the feeling of feeling like the thing that made me want to do it. What is my mouth doing? And that just means more referencing and really using the analysis of the producer side of things to make like reasoned like level choices. Break out the stuff I got going on, like vector scopes and levels and things, and actually start reading like, well, how loud is the bass? How loud are the mids? How much force is coming out relative to how much force is my stuff? And then like the changes are pretty basic. It's not a lot of like super high end like mixing choices. It's mostly just the taste to know when to push and how far to push. And that's just defining it for yourself, right? If you're just kind of going, then you get something like this that just kind of goes. And it goes cool. Like, there's a lot of really neat individual ideas in here. And, like, that's something else that was true about Dreams of Bass, is that I also didn't really know how to arrange the stuff I was trying to do. I'm not even necessarily saying you don't. Like, this could totally have been exactly what you wanted. But I a lot didn't know. Like, I can make this stuff, I can put it in a row, and I can make a beat. But I didn't actually listen to a lot of these tracks full well through to know how they actually are stacked up until I did. And then I made Bass Antics, and I'm like, oh, there's actually sections to these things. Cool. And then it all made a lot more sense insofar as my attempt to make something like that. And only just because this contains so many kind of like memes and tropes and stuff, but doesn't necessarily do it all together, makes me think that you might have been trying to. And therefore that whole spiel of advice. If this was your arranged decision, then yay, cool. I just still the mixing thing, like kicks and snare need to kind of pop a little more. And the sub need to be not so loud, and everything else can be a little bit louder. Then you just have a brighter, more present track. Yeah. All right, you guys. If you have any questions about this, please let me know Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day. Please. Well, I'll deserve it. I'm gonna figure out how my mouth is whistling.